In the Life is funded in part by the H. Van Ameringen Foundation, Patricia Kind in honor of her brother, Henry Van Ameringen, Arcus Foundation, the estate of Richard W. Weiland, Gill Foundation, Dr. L. Diane Bernard, Heller Bernard Fund, and these funders, and by the annual support of In the Life members like you.
This month, the lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender community celebrates pride and what it means to express one's authentic self. Tonight on In the Life, we send out a message of hope by featuring a gospel choir that raises spirits and awareness about HIV and AIDS in Oakland's black churches.
This is what HIV looks like. Strong people, people of faith.
And later, we look at employment discrimination and how some employees are making a difference by bringing their whole self to work.
One of the things about civil rights laws is it protects you being who you are. Doesn't require you to hide.
Oakland has been hit really hard by AIDS and HIV, and especially in the black community. People who find out that they're positive are not going to get treatment because of the shame associated with it. And a lot of that has to do with what we were taught in church. The Ambassadors is an organization of about 40 people made up of dancers, musicians, and singers, all from Oakland, California. And what we do is we use music, gospel music, as a means to go into the church and into the community and engage people about HIV and AIDS.
Would you receive our minister, Ernest Larkin?
Praise the Lord, everybody. Come on, somebody give God some praise. I've been living with HIV for a number of years now, and I'm thriving now, better than I was before I was diagnosed. When I tell people in the services that I'm HIV positive, I see a bunch of different reactions. Sometimes I see shock on people's face. I can't tell whether it's shock because they found out that I'm positive or they're shocked that I said that I was positive. I see relief on people's faces because I'm looking at people who I know are positive, but they haven't been able to say it at church. I want to take some time out now, and if there's anybody else in this room today that is HIV positive and you're not ashamed, you're not afraid, come and stand here with me.
Ernest inspired me to come out. And I hope what he did today will inspire others to come out also. This is what HIV looks like. Yeah. Strong people. Yeah. People of faith. Yeah. Black people. This is my first time here at this church, in this congregation, speaking about HIV and AIDS. It was not so difficult at all, because I am not ashamed. And you are willing to join this fight with us against AIDS and HIV. I want you to stand on your feet. Sometimes people won't come up and say anything at the church, but they'll get my number and call me, and they'll tell me about them being positive and how they haven't gotten any support from family, or they're afraid to tell their family. And make this pledge with me. I will talk
from this disease.
In Jesus' name.
In Jesus' name.
Amen.
Amen.
Somebody clap their hands. At the concerts that we do, we always have partnered with AIDS and HIV workers in the community. And we actually give time in the service for people to go and take advantage of those services. People actually get up in the middle of the concert and go and get tested, even our own members.
I myself was tested at the first event that the ambassadors offered. I think it's a great idea to have a gospel choir collaborate with an HIV testing center, because I don't think that people will go on their own. So if it's an environment that's safe, where we're all worshiping God, He's there, so you're gonna be okay. I think it really works hand in hand.
I believe that gospel choir has a reach that definitely extends our reach here at the clinic. Our capacity to go out into the community is limited. So organizations like the ambassadors really do provide that bridge to help bring awareness to the community about HIV, the need for testing and the need to really speak out about this reality.
When I first found out I was HIV positive, I spent 2 weeks in my room by myself, and I could do nothing but cry. Every time I thought about it, I was like, Lord, as hard as I work in the church, I don't deserve this. And I was really mad at God. And if it wasn't for my family being there, and my church family included being there, I wouldn't have made it through that period.
He's not only my brother, he's my father. He's been there for me through anything that I've ever needed, and I respect him to the day I die as being the best man that I know.
We love him to death. And because we love him, we're right there with him fighting this battle.
If my family wasn't a part of this with me, I wouldn't be able to do this work, because there are times when it gets really hard. The things people don't see when I'm sick. My family sees all that. They're there with me through doctor's appointments and hospital stays. And it's also important that the community see a family doing this together, because it sets a model for other families. Sometimes it gets really hard to say that you're positive because you really don't know how people are gonna react. And though I may look strong, I feel it in the inside. Sometimes I'm terrified. But to look back and see all those, to look back and see those ambassadors standing behind me like soldiers. And I'm forever grateful to them for that. I go to a pretty traditional Baptist church, but I'm openly gay at my church, and I'm a minister there. I was licensed and ordained at my church. My pastor ordained me knowing I was gay. Our mistake has been, we have decided we weren't doing anything about it because we thought it only affected gay people.
That's it! Be clear!
And it was okay for gay folks to have it and die.
Be clear!
Because we ignored it with our gay brothers and sisters, and because we ignored it, now it has come to our address and it's not just affecting it's affecting everybody. We could have stopped this years ago had we expressed love for our gay brothers and sisters and said, we won't let you die, but we're going to get in the fight with you. We could have stopped it back then, but we didn't do that. Now you look around and it's your brothers and your cousins and your uncles and aunties, and they're dying. Everyone knows somebody who is living with AIDS or HIV that's close to them. We are only 12 or 13% of this population, but we represent over 50% of all new infections in this country, all the way across the board. Black teens represent 58% of all new cases of AIDS and HIV. That's staggering. That means we're dying from the bottom up and from the top down, and pretty soon our whole race will be eliminated. What can we do about it? What should we do about it? What can you do about it as an individual? The first thing you should do is, if you're having sex, you should be tested.
Right.
I'm gonna say it again. If you're having sex, you should be tested, whether you're having protected sex or not. You should also, at your home, mothers, fathers, grandparents, talk to your children about AIDS and HIV. Talk to them about sex. Black people, it's time out for sex being a taboo topic at church and at home. The reason why we are dying is because we are not talking about it.
To allow Ernest and people to talk about HIV in church is very revolutionary because we never talked about it. You know, we hid it. We didn't want to talk about sex. We didn't want to talk about HIV.
The reason for that was because if we had talked about sex, everyone would have to talk about it, from the pastor on down, and we were in denial.
I think it's appropriate to talk about sex in church, and I think it's appropriate to talk about HIV.
The less that we talk about it, the more that we contribute to the issue. And so people are going to have to take more courage and to have an open and honest conversation about that issue.
One of the biggest things that we do is that we build relationships. It's about building a bridge of communication between the HIV community and the faith-based community.
But if you're a person living with HIV, this is your time. And I'm going to ask you to join me just down front, because you really are the warrior. Don't be ashamed. Don't be embarrassed. Amen. It's just a disease. I'm going to say it again. It's just a disease. It is not a life sentence. It's just a disease. And God is greater than HIV. This choir brings effervescence and joy and power while they're messaging HIV messages to their audiences. That's an incredible, incredible ministry.
2 years ago, no church would talk about AIDS or HIV nor homosexuality.
The churches are beginning to open up and have these discussions more now since the ambassadors has been pushing.
We've actually noticed homosexual ministries popping up in churches. We've also seen AIDS and HIV outreach ministries popping up in churches. The dialogue has been started. Now we just have to continue it.
Right now what we're doing is we're operating here in Oakland, in the Bay Area, but this isn't just a local problem. It's a national and a global problem. So what we would love to do is replicate this across the country and globally. One of the songs that we sing is called It Won't Last, and the words say it won't last, HIV, it won't last too much longer. And the message of that song is that together we can win this fight against AIDS and HIV. If we come together as a community, we come together as a church, we come together as a people, we can win this fight against AIDS and HIV. There is no reason for anybody else to die from it.
We all need a job. Look, in this economy, right, how important it is to have a job to pay the bills. There is nothing as devastating as being fired from a job because you're black, because you're a woman, because you're Muslim, or because you're gay.
In 2010, Andre Cooley was working as a corrections officer for juvenile detainees for the Forest County Sheriff's Department in Hattiesburg, Mississippi.
I just wanted to become a corrections officer because it would give me the opportunity to give back through service. Considering where I came from and where I am today, I was the first person in my family to graduate from a four-year university. And so that really meant a lot because there are a lot of children coming behind me and I want to be a role model for them as well.
After a domestic dispute with his boyfriend, the sheriff's department found out that he was gay.
On the day of the incident, me and my boyfriend, we were at my house, and he became violent, and I called for help. And when I called for help, the local police and the sheriff's department responded to the call. And when they responded, my boyfriend outed me to my boss.
The sheriff's department fired Andre. With the help of the ACLU, he filed a lawsuit alleging discrimination based on sexual orientation.
It's a risk any place, but in Mississippi, it's certainly a big risk to announce to the world, I'm gay, in a very public way, which is what he had to do when he brought this case.
It's not something that I just hid, it just wasn't discussed. When I got hired, they weren't looking at the fact that I was gay. It was looking at my resume and the fact that I had been to school and that I came from foster care and that I was trying to make a difference. And so they were very impressed with that. And so it's like, you will be a very good fit for the job. And then, like, when everything came out, it's like, oh, you're fired. And I'm like, why?
Researchers are studying whether cases like Andre's are isolated or more widespread. At the nationally recognized Williams Institute at UCLA, survey research has revealed the extent of the problem.
According to the best data that we have available, the Williams Institute estimates that there are over 7.5 million lesbian and gay and bisexual workers in the U.S. labor force today. There are consistent research findings of very high levels of discrimination against LGBT people. When asked in surveys, LGBT people report ranges of discrimination from 10 to 50%, depending on whether they're asked about harassment or being fired. When you survey transgender people, the level of discrimination is even higher.
There is no uniform federal law in the United States on discrimination against LGBT people in the workplace. The Equal Employment Opportunity Commission is a federal agency charged with enforcing existing employment anti-discrimination laws. Hai Feldblum, an out lesbian, is one of the commissioners of the agency.
We are the first step anytime someone feels that they have been discriminated against in employment. So that's race, sex, religion, color, national origin, age, disability, and genetic information. On these bases, you can't fire someone, refuse to hire them, treat them differently in employment. We have not finished our civil rights journey in terms of employment, and we clearly need an explicit law, as President Obama has said, that would prohibit discrimination based on sexual orientation and gender identity. And when that law gets passed, it's again this agency that's going to be responsible for implementing it.
Because there's no federal legislation, a limited number of states have passed anti-discrimination laws.
So there's still a majority of states in the United States where it's legal to fire someone because of their sexual orientation or gender identity. And even in those states that do have laws, the coverage of these state laws varies from state to state, and in some cases doesn't provide adequate protection. For example, most laws do not include protections for transgender people.
Often the remedies are not as strong as we want them to be. Sometimes they don't have attorney's fees attached to it, so you might have a right, but if you can't find a lawyer to represent you, it's hard to get a remedy. Sometimes they don't cover a lot of employers, so it's very much of a patchwork.
Although Mississippi has no state law protecting LGBT workers, Andre was fortunate enough to fall within one of those patchwork rules because he worked for the Sheriff's Department, a local government entity.
Public employees really don't know they have rights because there's not a statute that says it. There's not a law you can look up in the books that says you're protected. It's, the protection is really based on constitutional issues and case law. A public employer can't just put a policy in place, take an action based on what's called an animus. They can't say, we don't like this, we don't like it that you're gay, and so we're going to fire you.
After Andre filed his lawsuit, the Sheriff's Department reversed its decision and took Andre back.
I'm basically just glad to be back because I really like the job and the people in this area. I'm not gonna say that going back isn't gonna have its challenges, but the Sheriff's Department has made a lot of changes. I think that's gonna make transitioning back into the position a lot easier, and so I mean, I'm very optimistic about going back.
When you work for the government, you thankfully do have the Constitution that is protecting you. I mean, that's why the ACLU can bring a suit against a sheriff's office in Mississippi. But remember, the federal Constitution applies only to government action. In the private sector, we need to have legislation.
In the absence of protective laws, progress has come from a surprising source: corporate America. Bill Hendricks is a scientist working for Dow AgroSciences in Indianapolis, Indiana.
Dow, being a middle America company that doesn't sell directly to consumers, you might think wouldn't be overly supportive of their LGBT employees, but that's not the case at all, and I found it to be quite the opposite. We hire a lot of scientists, and it's difficult to find good scientists, period. And why would you ever want to go out and exclude part of that population? It doesn't make sense. And so the company early on understood the business case of that.
Dow has, over the last 10 years, implemented a whole range of policies, procedures and benefits that are absolutely equitable to all employees, be that for same-sex couples or opposite-sex couples. It's one and the same. Specifically speaking about transgenders, we've got a new benefits program that allows people to elect various different procedures, processes that they wish to take, changing gender. Gender programs, hormones, counseling, all sorts of things like that.
Dow's LGBT-friendly policies came about after employees took the initiative to form an employee resource group and push for rights internally.
In 1999-2000, a group of employees got together and realized that we didn't have protections in our EEOC statement that would protect our gay and lesbian employees from being fired. They brought that to the attention of the CEO, and that really formed that basic group of GLAD, Gays, Lesbians, and Allies at Dow, our employee resource group.
Different companies call them different things: a business network, an employee resource group. But they're basically ways for LGBT people to get together, find one another, and begin to organize within their company for domestic partner benefits, for having the right policies in place. They've been really the catalyst for change on so many levels within corporate America.
I didn't come out until they formed the network. And then I watched for like a year or two to see what they were doing, just to make sure that they weren't rubber stamping things. And once I recognized that they were actually serious about it and wanting to change the environment, then I joined the network.
Like most companies, you know, we had to grow into it, if you will, and to get our legs underneath us. So it was a lot in the beginning of putting together the basic sort of business case, a foundation. But then as time has gone on and the company saw the benefits of supporting the LGBT employee, it really made, I think, the company feel more comfortable in stepping up to be an out front leader. We're basic chemical business at a very middle America kind of place. If we can make it work, I think any company can make it work, and we're proof of that.
Today, the majority of Fortune 500 companies put sexual orientation in their EEO policies. 40% include gender identity. Over half of Fortune 500 companies now offer domestic partner benefits. Because there is no federal law to protect the LGBT community from discrimination, it's important for the companies to do that work themselves.
During a conversation with my boss, he said, well, one day you'll find a husband and get married and have all sorts of kids, a house. And I said, I'm not going to have a husband. And he, kind of went red-faced on me. And I said, well, I'm going to have a wife. He's like, okay, well, a wife, a house, kids and cars. And it kind of eased up the situation, and I've never been happier.
As an out employee, and I have always felt much more open about who I am in my work environment than, say, in my other environments at home and in other places because of the way the state is.
The state of Indiana has no protection for LGBT workers in the private sector. Indiana also does not recognize same-sex marriage and is moving to ban civil unions and possibly domestic partnerships.
We have protections from 8 to 5 that I don't have once I leave the gate. Dow has facilities in a lot of smaller communities that don't offer protections to LGBT employees. It's a sad state of affairs, and I'm better protected inside the Dow gate than the second I leave and try and go home.
That state of affairs has prompted Bill and Dow to take the fight for employment equality to Congress.
Mr. Chairman and members of the subcommittee, my name is Bill.
The proposed federal law that would protect LGBT workers is the Employment Non-Discrimination Act, or ENDA.
ENDA is really the successor bill to the gay civil rights bill that was introduced in the mid-'70s. I don't think many of us have a lot of expectations that it can pass in this current Congress, but there's still a lot of work to do on it, and I know a lot of us are very anxious to educate all these new members of Congress so that when it can pass, we've done our work and educated people.
One of the things about civil rights laws is it protects you being who you are. Doesn't require you to hide. Once there is a law that says you can't discriminate based on sexual orientation, that also means you can't fire someone because they have a picture of their husband, the male guy with the male husband, on the desk, right? Or if I had pictures of my partner and kids. That it allows people to breathe.
I mean, my personal beliefs on it are, people should be free to, be, who they are and be accepted as a part of, having a diverse workplace. Because, most workplaces, they say, we embrace diversity, but do we?
Thank you for watching In the Life. To learn more about the issues in tonight's program, or to tell us your thoughts about the show, text ITL to 69866 on your mobile phone, and visit itlmedia.org to watch our web exclusive on transgender discrimination, injustice at every turn.
As we shine a light for the world to see, and no one deserves to be bound by disease. So don't you give up hope, that's where I plant my seed. So hold my hand and speak for all it won't last. HIV, it won't last too much longer. It won't last. HIV, it won't last if we take a stand much longer.
In the Life is funded in part by the H. Van Ameringen Foundation, Patricia Kind in honor of her brother, Henry Van Ameringen, Arcus Foundation, the estate of Richard W. Weiland, Gill Foundation, Dr. L. Diane Bernard, Heller Bernard Fund, and these funders, and by the annual support of In the Life members like you.